G'day. Welcome. I'm Stephen Travers. Tonight tonight for me, good morning for you, good day, wherever you are. And look, speaking of wherever you are, I'd love you to tell me where you are in the world watching this, listening to this from. And I'd also like you to tell me what the biggest block you face in your drawing improvement as far as you know. And happy birthday to Alihan in Turkey, who's partly celebrating his birthday by watching this live stream. So thank you very much, Alihan. Sorry, let me just adjust this on my screen. That's better. So welcome, everyone. I've looked at hi, Jessica. I've looked at thousands and thousands of drawings done by hundreds and hundreds of artists. Now, some of them are ones I've given one-on-one lessons to, so I've obviously seen their work more intensely. Others, though, or most of them, are ones that I've seen because of social media, and because one of the things I do is when someone follows me on my Instagram account, I try and send them a welcome message that just gives a little introduction to how I started drawing, but it also lets them know about my YouTube channel as well if they'd like to subscribe and to see how I paint, how I draw. But while I'm doing that, I pass through their account from where I have their name on my followers, and to get to their direct message button. So I get to look at their work, and if they're artists and I've got time, I like to have a look at the drawings that they've done, that they've posted, to see what sort of things they do and how they do it, and particularly when they draw fairly directly similar to the sorts of things I do. Hi there, everyone. Welcome to this. And so sometimes it's a quick look, sometimes it's a long look. But what I tend to see is the same sorts of problems in all their work. Now, I don't mean the same problems in all the work of all the artists. But when I look at a given account and I look at all the posts that this particular artist has posted on their Instagram account, I see the same mistakes over and over and over and over and over again in sometimes dozens or as many drawings as I scroll down to see. Now, for another artist, it will be different mistakes, but I see them over and over and over and over again. And it makes me think, why is this so? Why do so many people seem to hit a point where they kind of stop and there's no improvement? Now, I don't know whether you feel that describes you or not. If you missed me saying at the very start, for this session, if you're watching it live, I'd love you to tell me what the biggest problem you face or the biggest hurdle you feel you face in improving in your drawing, in your drawing skills. But I must admit, I sometimes look at these accounts and there's so many drawings in the one account, and I think this person has put so much effort and so much time, so many hopes and dreams and so many desires to do well and to express their creativity and to capture something. And yet I can look now and think, but they're really not getting any further from this point. And I think, well, why is this so? Why is this so? What can we say to maybe help people get through this place, this situation, to maybe work out the dynamic and to understand what's happening? So that's what I'm hoping to do in this live session with my thoughts, which are, at the end of the day, just my thoughts. But if they're helpful for anyone, that would be great. Because I think that this problem of people's drawing skill plateauing at a certain level and then just being fairly constant after that does come from a fairly common cause. Even though people's drawings look different, and the issues, the problems are different. I think the cause of this plateauing of improvement comes from the same cause. Mel from Sydney, welcome. And that's this. I think people draw things that are simply, or they try to draw things that are simply beyond their ability level to draw at that stage. It's not to say they couldn't reach a place of drawing that, but right at this point, they lack the skills to be able to do quite a long way up the road in Bundaberg, but they lack the skills to do a good job at all the things that are demanded in that particular subject or groups of subjects in that work. Someone's saying their main problems are perspective and overworking. Yeah. And I think if we, I know I quite often in different contexts make this analogy, but if we think about learning a musical instrument, or we think about learning, say, carpentry, or to become an electrician, if we think of learning athletics, if we think of any skill that needs to be developed, then the idea of starting at a very, what's the best way to put it? Well, a pretty basic place, and working at basic skills until we reach a point where we've mastered them enough to start to put a few of them together. Hello there. To put a few of them together, and then to create something with a few of those skills together. So the most obvious one is a piano, where we learn to play scales, and we learn to use our fingers to hit the notes we need to hit in the way we need to hit them to get the sound we want. And we learn then to read music, well, depending which way we learn, what approach we use, but we learn to then put the notes together, either with or without music, to get the tunes that we want. And we start with simple tunes, and the tunes become more complex, more demanding as we go on. We don't start expecting to be at performance level. We don't expect that we're going to kind of like have whatever the entertainment public presentation display. Thanks, Mel. Whatever the public display of the creativity is, we don't expect to do that when we learn the piano, quite possibly for years, if at all. Which is not to say we can't have lots of fun learning the musical instrument, piano, violin, whatever. Or it might be a foreign language. Now there are different ways of learning foreign languages, and if you have the opportunity to be in a foreign language, to be in a foreign place and just have people speaking around you, then that's great. But certainly traditionally, it started with learning some simple words, some simple constructions, and learning to put these together, learning particular idiosyncratic phrases, colloquialisms, that's the word, colloquialisms, and so forth, and learning to speak them and pronounce them, and learning to hear and have conversation. And usually, certainly when I was at school, you'd start with very stilted conversations about really bizarre things, but because, I don't know, the grammar was easier, they would use these odd subjects to create these very artificial sounding sentences. But you wouldn't start with all the complexities of future conditional tenses and all of that. You'd start with the present tense, and then the simple past, and then, and with a limited vocab. And so we start in a and you're not expected to do public speaking possibly ever in the foreign language. But when it comes to drawing, maybe painting as well, but I think drawing more than painting, for some reason people think, I can just pick up a pen and start to draw, and that's wonderful. I love the accessibility of drawing, that we can do it so easily. I mean, even painting, you've got to buy stuff, and you've got to buy paint, and you've got to have materials to paint on, and you've got to have space, and there are barriers to painting. and just the time it takes. But drawing, we can just draw for 5 minutes, as I've been doing lately with my 5-minute drawing exercise video. So can just draw very quickly, and anyone can do it. But I think that's part of the problem, that we can all, in a sense, have a go, but we can have a go with a lot of enthusiasm, but possibly not much understanding about the learning process. And we may be aware that we have a certain natural talent. And look, what natural talent is, I don't know. I did a video once about a year ago on what is natural talent, and is it a real thing or isn't it a real thing? Is it really just practice and hard work, or is there something that people are born with that gives them a head start? Or is that thing just enthusiasm for the subject? Look, I don't know. I think I knew less after I'd finished the video than I did before. But whatever we think it is, or how it comes down to, we still have to, we still need to be measured in our thinking of what we're trying to do, what we're trying to. Yes, well, if you watch that video, then you're probably no wiser than I am about the subject now. But what because we can get run away with our enthusiasm and just start and just work at things in a way that it's hard to do in the same way with other things. So there are lots of self-taught drawing artists, possibly more so than for other art areas. Now, there's nothing wrong with being self-taught, let me say. I'm largely self-taught, so I'm a great believer of it. And it's wonderful. I said, it's one of the things I like about drawing. It's so accessible. You just need a pen and paper and a few moments, and we can all have that anywhere. But I did have the advantage of being a trained high school teacher. Now, it wasn't art, but it was English and history. But what that taught me was the skill involved in learning. And so I had a sense when I started drawing of what it means to learn a subject, and therefore I was able to use that to, if you like, package what I did in a way that was tailored to me, a way that was tailored to me to help me progress as fast as I can. Someone's just asking, fear of drawings or fear of start. Yeah, look, if it's any consolation, I still put off starting almost every drawing I do. And in a sense, the larger the drawing is, the more I'm likely to walk around the house and find other things to do rather than start. So it is, it's not an uncommon thing. I find these 5-minute videos, the 5-minute drawings rather, that I've been making videos of in the last week, have really helped with that. I find they're much easier to sit down and do, because I'm thinking it's only 5 minutes. If I don't like it, if I mess it up from the start, I can do another one in 5 minutes, and I can just, leave the first one. So I'm finding these really quick exercises. I mean, they are exercises, but I do want them to be as much as is possible to do in 5 minutes of finished artwork. So they're not just a sort of a quick thumbnail where I'm just exploring a few marks or whatever. I do want them to be a finished work. But I find that because there's less investment, I'm not so worried. Look, I do have a few videos as well. Ashley, I'm not sure how to say your name, or maybe Yarkin is your given name, but on just perfectionism and working issues, because that's often fear of mistakes, and therefore we don't want to start because we're afraid of making mistakes. So I do have some strategies in those videos as well. Me too. Yes. Look, I have some videos on how to draw a straight line as well. Well, Silent Witness, if we draw architecture, straight lines are really handy. So yeah. No, Amy, I would much rather do a straight line any day than a curve. Am I going to struggle? It's like, Emma, beginning an art course in September, and I'm self-taught. no, goodness, I'm sure you'll be a spectacular success. I guess the thing is to learn from the teacher. I mean, like, it's probably a good actually place to get back a little bit to what we're talking about in just to focus on, if I'm not self-taught, if I'm doing a course or I have a teacher at least having lessons, what do I get that I don't get if I'm kind of muddling my own way? Well, I get two things. The first thing I get is a curriculum. I get a curriculum. I get I get the material that someone has worked out in a measured way, and they've said, okay, if somebody wants to learn to draw and possibly learn to draw a particular subject, if we start with this area and we maybe draw these simple things and we develop certain drawing skills while we draw these things with a limited focus, and we work on them until we do them well and we understand what's happening. And then we now apply them with some more difficult subject matter. We'll add some things to our scenes, but we'll also perhaps add some more technique things to do. We might look at the sort of marks we make. We might go beyond just drawing lines, but making different marks. And then we might introduce more difficult scenes and introduce possibly how we create the effect of textures and so forth. And so that all gets done by the person who designs the course. And so that means I don't start too far along, so I get overwhelmed, which is the problem, I think, that the drawings I'm talking about that I see often on Instagram accounts have. That drawing after drawing has clearly been done. Clearly, the artist has tackled a subject or subjects repeatedly that are just beyond the skill level of what they're able to do well. So drawings always look amazing in our minds. Yes, that's true. But that's partly because we really can imagine more than we can ever do. So that's a good thing about our imagination. How do you stop the habit of zooming in on drawing and start with the big picture? Look, people. Some people draw by zooming in and drawing out, and some people rough out forms. So in a sense, it's what's working. But if you don't think, yes, I drew that is working for you, then yes. It partly depends on it's a bit hard to sort of answer. Simple lines and basic shapes to warm up with, yes, that can be very helpful. But as well as a curriculum, if I do a course, I have a teacher as well. I have someone who is overseeing the process personally with me. So I have someone who now takes the curriculum and checks that I'm understanding it properly, that I'm able to do it, and most importantly, is critiquing my work, is marking my work in some way, is giving me feedback about what I should be doing, or where I can improve, where I haven't understood things, or where I could just do it better. They give me focus on improvement all the time. Just reading the question, what when someone likes to draw without fear and tries the impossible without to have the knowledge? I'm so in a person, and mistakes are I'm so a person, mistakes are a lesson to me. Yeah, look, it's great to push ourselves. I'm not saying we should just stay with very simple, basic things and not go. And can I say, if you're finding this helpful, can you hit the like button for me? Because that does help with the video being seen by more people. Good morning, Ian. You've come in earlier than you normally do. Amy, thank you. That's very kind of you. £5. Lovely. Well, that's distracted me. I'm trying to do the exchange rate, £5 to Australian dollars at the moment. It's probably about $10. Yeah, great. Thank you. And now I've totally lost my train of thought. Yeah. I'm not saying that we shouldn't push ourselves, because that's always a great way to learn. But if we go too far, then we're making lots of mistakes. And if we're learning something such as a foreign language, then we probably know we've gone too far too fast because we can't understand people and they can't understand us. But if I'm doing something, myself, I may lack the expertise to actually see the things that are wrong. And this is the problem when I'm self-taught, because I may not be doing things in the most helpful order, and I don't have someone looking over my shoulder and giving me guidance and encouragement as to where perhaps I need to work further before I push ahead. Because whatever we do over and over again, we get better at. And you may have heard me talk about when one of my children was learning the piano and they used to rush the piano playing to get their practice over and done with. And I'd say, if you keep doing that, you're going to get very good at playing the piano too quickly, because that will be what you get better at doing. And it's the same with drawing. If we draw things that aren't right over and over and over again, then after a period of time, we can kind of lose the ability to see that it's not right, because we've got so used to seeing it in our drawings, because obviously we see our drawings in great detail as we draw them and very intensely, and then if we look back over them. And so if we don't have a way of working out what's worked and what hasn't worked, then it's very hard to not get into an unhelpful habit then of just continuing the same way, that, oh, well, this is the way I draw this, and this is the way I draw this, and this is the way I draw this. And all these various unhelpful drawing techniques become entrenched. And this is what I feel like I see when I look in some of these Instagram drawing accounts, when I'm going through them to send them a welcome message to when they follow me on Instagram. And I look at their drawings and I think, oh man, you just need to, you need to pull back a little bit. And instead of drawing a really complex scene, dare I say badly, draw a simpler one really well, because you will learn so much more and you will get to the place where you can then draw the complex scene well. But we can't go beyond what we're able to do. And part of the problem is too, I think this might depend a bit on what subjects we like to draw. But if you're someone like me and you love drawing architecture, it's because you love architecture. And so you become enthusiastic about the subject. And therefore the subject matter that inspires you most, inspires me most, becomes what you want to draw. But I can remember looking at the Musée du Louvre and just thinking, oh, this is the most beautiful building in the world. I'd love to draw it, but I will never be able to draw it because it's just too hard. And of course, I've drawn it a number of times now. So I'm not at all saying that we can't get to the things that inspire us, but if we try and start there, I see people who start with the Musée du Louvre when they should be starting with a little cottage and learning things on a smaller scale, because the first things we draw, they're not going to be perfect. So we don't want to invest too much time and effort into producing, at best, an okay drawing. We want to learn those skills at that early stage quickly. And this is why I think these 5-minute videos I've been doing, 5-minute drawing exercise videos I've been doing lately, are also really good, because they do help. They do help us learn things quickly if we do them the right way, because it's not just doing the drawing and moving on to the next one. It's doing the drawing and then saying, how have I done? Having a look at it. And I was thinking maybe I should do a video on on a checklist for critiquing our own drawings, so that when you don't have a teacher to say, oh, this looks a bit strange, this is dodgy, then that could be useful for me to give you the sorts of things that I would be looking for if I were critiquing a drawing. Because I mean, if anyone's interested, I do one-on-one lessons critiquing drawings. I do them via Instagram video chat. I mean, this isn't meant to be an ad, but it is the one thing I charge for. I do all my lessons free, and I hold nothing back. If I have a good idea, I tell you. But for the actual sort of critiquing of drawings, that is something that as an artist, I do try and make some money from. So if you contact me through Instagram, if you're interested in that, I can give you those details. But I certainly have a list of things in my head when I look at a drawing to critique it, whether I've drawn it or whether I'm doing it with someone else, that I use to work out, has this drawing been successful? And it does partly depend, of course, on what I was trying to do. But within that, if I'm generally wanting a realistic looking drawing, which is usually what I'm trying to do, then that can be very helpful. Yes, thanks, Mel. These are excellent ideas. Hang on, a preferred brand with a pencil. Yes, I like Staedtler Lumograph pencils, and I have a Staedtler mechanical pencil as well. They don't pay me. I just like their pencils. They have a nice feel, and yeah. Yeah, Mel's suggesting two ways of critiquing our drawings are to take a photo and to look at a photo which is smaller, or we could just, what I do is just look down through the camera viewfinder, because it shrinks it down really small, and that's a big enough change to give me, if you like, fresh eyes to see it. Because some mistakes that I can't see, especially with things like proportions or angles, when they're spread out over a larger sheet of paper, when they're brought down to a space this big, I can see that the angles, when they're, if you like, condensed, aren't as accurate as I would have liked. Or if we've got the drawing on some paper, we can hold it up in front of a mirror and see it flipped. Well, actually, we can do that on our camera as well. We can, if we can just flip the image depending on the editing that we've got. But yeah, that's just flipping it, seeing the reverse, is also a good way of seeing it with fresh eyes. The other way to see a drawing with fresh eyes is to thanks IWD, is to actually ask some fresh eyes how it looks. And we have to be careful how we do that, because we have to ask someone who will be brutally honest with us. We're not after compliments, okay? We're not asking someone who will say, oh, this is very nice. We don't care if it's better than they could do. We want to know, does anything not look right? And the person may not be able to tell us what's wrong, but it is still easier, even if you don't know what's wrong, to know that something's not quite right, especially with things such as perspective. We can tell the mirror is brutally honest, and that's just when I look in front of it every morning. At my age, it gets more and more brutal every day. Silent witness, but hopefully I'm not talking about that. Yes. So yeah, we can ask our children if we have children, because they usually are quite happy to be honest with us. But we need someone who's not seeing those mistakes, that what we saw line by line as they appeared, and got used to seeing them. So that can be really helpful. Yes, I don't know what you meant. And I just think it's such a shame when I look at some of these flipping upside down. Yep, that can be helpful too. Yeah. Some ads are about to run shortly for some people, so please help me out and let them run. Don't click them off. That would be, I think they just appear down the bottom. So yeah, that would be good if you let them be. But I see, as I said, for a given artist, I see the same mistakes in every drawing, and it just seems such a shame because it's all this time and effort could have been more focused in improving if they started with some simpler things and really worked at nailing those simpler things. And it does depend a bit on what subjects we draw. Now I don't particularly draw figures. My figures are all quite small, but yes, me too. It would be, um, um, but but if I saw, say, a drawing of a horse, I wouldn't necessarily know what was wrong with it to know that something was wrong with it. I'm familiar enough about horses to see if their anatomy is distorted in a drawing, but I may not be. But I probably don't know enough to necessarily be able to say why. But for the person who's done the drawing, if I could say, look, oh, that back leg, it just doesn't seem to fit with the rest of the horse, with the direction it's going, or the head doesn't seem to be on the neck properly, then the artist can take that feedback and go back and work out the issue themselves, particularly if they've still got their reference. So it's given them a focus to see how they can improve. But the sorts of things, I mean, because I do see a lot of architectural drawings, obviously perspective angles. I honestly see some perspective angles, and I think I mean, maybe they didn't have a reference and they made it up in their mind, and so they know that there are angles, but they don't really understand the pattern, that the fan pattern that I talk about, if you haven't come across it. And so the angles are, and we have like different eye levels across the one picture, and I see these really fundamental mistakes. And like, once you get the fundamental lines wrong, if you like, it's the skeleton of the drawing. It doesn't matter how much detail you draw, how nicely, it's still going to look wrong. And that's why it's so important that these basic skills are learnt, and they're learnt well. And because if someone's doing drawing after drawing after drawing, then they're clearly, and they're in a realistic style, then they're wanting the drawings to look realistic. They're wanting them to look like this is a scene that could be there. And so it's such a shame when drawing after drawing doesn't go past, doesn't let a viewer kind of sense that it's real, where there's too much distortion for it to look like it's something that really could be. Yeah, look, I am talking. Was it Dig Illusion Studios? I am talking about drawing, particularly at this point. Painting is a bit different again, because painting can be very fluid right up until the last brush stroke, and you can work and mold and push in and pull out. And I did 10 years of just only oil painting before I began to draw. But particularly freehand drawing directly in ink, as I do, every line is still there at the end. So we need to know where the lines need to go at the very start. And even if we're drawing with pencil and we can erase them, we don't want to be erasing every line 5 times. We're not going to get a good looking drawing if that's our process. It's just going to be a bit of a smudgy, kind of overworked mess. So perspective angles, foreshortening is often wrong. The line work often lacks subtlety. Yes, I've enjoyed being able to paint over my mistakes too. I only ever did one painting of my wife, and she made me paint over the whole thing. So there you go. I thought it was worth keeping, but yeah. But I think textures are a big area where I see someone has reached too far, and they haven't been able to really get a technique that works. And yet these are textures that come up over and over again. So leaves on trees, bricks on buildings, tiles on roofs, um, pathways, roadways, the sort of like large areas of things. And so in the absence of perhaps being led to think and develop a credible technique, people fall back to patterns to kind of represent whatever's really there. Because one of the big things we don't learn to do is we don't learn to observe carefully. We don't learn how much we have to look at something before we put the first line on the paper. And uh, just we rush to actually put the line on the paper, and we don't really know where it's going to go enough. And when we have a drawing with lines not in, like when I look at a drawing that someone's drawn with a reference, and sometimes with a student, and I've got their reference and I'm looking at their drawing, and I say, well, look, I'll put them side by side the way I do when I'm doing my drawing videos. And I'll say, look, okay, so your drawing, the reference photo, the angle of this roof is like this. Now let's just slide along to your drawing, and the angle's like this. And I say, what were you thinking? And they say, I don't know. I thought I'd done what I saw. And that's really the test. That's really the test of am I observing carefully enough? Because if the angle doesn't match up pretty closely, I'm not observing. Look, I did a video once where I said, do this if you draw lots of buildings. Put the reference and your drawing side by side, and just from the reference, get the angle, and then just slide it along over the top of your drawing and see how accurate your angles are. And if they're pretty much accurate, that's fine. If they're really not, then the problem is when you go to put the line on the paper, you haven't yet seen all of the information you need to see to transfer it to the paper. We often get very caught up with the skills of drawing lines and techniques for this and that, but there's no point knowing how to do any of those things if we're not placing them correctly on the paper. And it's not just getting things such as the angle, although in the first few lines that may be the only things we need to work out. But as the drawing progresses, it's not just knowing things such as the angles and the lengths or the widths or whatever, but it's also where to draw them in relation to the things we've already drawn. And again, when our proportions aren't correct, when I've been drawing maybe a tower and I do the top, I do one side, I do the top, and then I make it too fat, it's because I haven't observed the width carefully enough then to draw it accurately. And so these are all clues that I need to observe more carefully. But we often think that the lack of skill is in our drawing. It's not. It's in our observation. I've got some of my earliest videos I did were on, I think I called them Observation for Drawing Success 1, 2, and 3. So although no, I don't have a pen, but now that it's in my hand, it gives my fingers something to do at least. And they are quite early videos, so they're a little more kind of static than I think they are now. But I really do think the information in them is very useful. We usually don't draw. Our mistakes don't come from lack of drawing skills nearly as much as we think they are. It comes from lack of observation and lack of working out. So observation, and particularly how things align with other things and proportion. The other thing though is in terms of, if you like, textures, it's it's create the creative thinking that we need to do to represent the effect. So whenever we have things where we can't draw the actual detail there because there's just too much of it, what do we do? You know, and that's why I've actually started a playlist on drawing the effect of detail, which is the way I describe this challenge, where when there's way too much to draw. So the most obvious one I always use is leaves on a tree. And that's why so many people have trouble drawing trees so often. And I would look at many drawings of buildings that would have a tree with them. And the building would look okay, but the tree would look like someone with far less drawing skill had drawn it. And obviously the person doesn't like drawing trees the way they like drawing the buildings, and they don't know, they haven't worked out a way of tackling the leaves as well as possibly other things. Yes, thanks there. Bye. Yep. With angles, find the start and the end point. And look, here's a really good technique tip on drawing lines is always be looking at where you want the line to end. Don't look at where the pen is. Don't look at where the lines, start the pen in the right spot and then look to see where you want the line to go, and then bring the line up looking at where you want. So you use your eye to guide your arm. Well, I couldn't throw a ball to save my life, Ori, but it does sound exactly like what I'm talking about if that's what you do. See, holding the pen's helpful. Yeah, so that's very helpful. And I do find putting a dot where I want, if I know where I want the line to end, if I'm confident of that, then putting a dot where I want it to end is very helpful. Yeah, trying to observe triangles. Yeah, anything that lets us get the proportions correct. Negative space is another great way of working out how to accurately place the lines. It depends what's around our object, but sometimes if I have to draw a shape, if it's against another shape, or maybe there's shadow behind it, it can be more accurate to actually draw the shape of the shadow and let that sort of define the buildings or whatever it is. When I first started drawing architectural sculptures, which were a bit of a problem at first, I in the end found that particularly if there was darkness behind them, I would draw them by negative space and they would look much more accurate. So I am feeling a bit ticklish in the throat tonight. Yeah, so textures, I think, are one of those things where people have adopted. When I look at these drawings where I feel like they've hit the wall as far as improvement goes, I find that one of the big giveaways are textures that are very lacking in any effectiveness in terms of how they look, in any visual effectiveness, but are just consistently used. And the same pattern, if you like, the same texture is used whenever that thing. It's almost like if there are trees, they've got a sheet of paper with this tree leaf texture and they sort of cut out the shape and put it on the tree. That's a little bit brutal, but it's in essence what I see, because we haven't learned to draw the effect of what I see. When I see a tree and I've got paint, well, it's a different approach that I use than when I've got a pen, although there was more overlap than I expected when I started drawing. Yep. And I think the larger we're drawing, then the more of the body that we use, the better. But if they're very small details, I find though that I draw with my fingers further and further up the pen as I go on. I find these 5-minute drawings I've been doing lately, holding the pen further up, just keep it a bit looser, a bit quicker, lets me be a little, almost flick more, which gives a nice gestural line and I think seems to work well. Another problem that I see a lot of these works having is a very flat appearance. um, very, very. I think it's partly because most of the time they're drawn from photos, and the problem with photos is that it's. I mean, when we see, we have two eyes, so that creates the sense of depth. But a single lens compresses everything into flatness, and even if we draw the photo really accurately, it's going to look very flat. I think I particularly see a lot of drawings of faces that are drawn in pencil that in lots of ways are drawn very kind of like with a real sense of kind of perfectionism in trying to get the tonal values and the gradation of tonal values with the graphite kind of really accurately done, but all the faces look very flat. They don't seem to have any three dimensions, and I think it's because the drawings they've copied them from have that weakness, and they haven't been able to actually go past the drawing to put the depth back in. I think a portraiture is probably one of the areas where drawing from life has a huge advantage in drawing from a reference, possibly more so than in architecture. There's other distortions that can happen, and particularly with buildings and things, and where they pull the detail in, and we lose the vertical lines. Actually, the newer iPhones, you can I think the one that's past my model, the next one that I don't have yet, but where you have that vertical distortion where the edges pull in, and it gives a bit of a 3-point perspective effect. You can actually undo that. It restores everything to the vertical. So I'm kind of hoping to get that at some point. But so another big problem is that there's not a real grasp of form, that when the person's looked at the reference, they've seen shape rather than form. Shape is sort of a 2-dimensional outline word, whereas form is the 3 dimensions. And when we're thinking shape, we have an emphasis on outline. And I often see drawings where there's like a heavy outline over the outside of maybe the whole object that doesn't bear any relation to, if you like, the visual intensity of that edge, or the lack of visual intensity of that edge. So if I'm looking at something that actually is a corner, then a corner, then a hard straight line might be a great way to go, because it reflects the reality. But if I'm looking at something like say an orange or a ball, a surface that curves away from me, now even though the edge is going to be a circle, it's like a surface that's becoming less and less substantial with every tiny distance away from me till it disappears from view. And maybe for that, a sort of a lighter line is more appropriate in conveying something of the presence of the object, of the 3-dimensionality presence of the object. And when we look at things in our reference, working out the 3D form can help us plot our line work, or as I prefer to think of it now, our marks. Because when we talk about marks, I think it's far more accurate. I think this was it my last live video? We talked about thinking marks instead of thinking lines, but it can be really helpful. I was going to do just a normal video on that too. Would it be more helpful to draw the negative space or shadow? Look, it may be, it may not be. Like, this is where it really is very individual. See, these are the creative choices that as artists we get to make, if we're aware that they're a thing. And these are the things that give our drawings the sense of whatever our drawings have, whether we start to change our line work or just think a line's a line, And so I because of my architectural scenes and street scenes and cityscapes and whatnot, depth has always, for me, been a really kind of big focus. And again, I think because of the painting too, painting scenes where there was great depth, where there were trees way in the distance compared to the main tree. And so trying to represent that some things are close and some things are far away. The lack of attempt to do that is one of the things I see in drawings that kind of hit the wall in terms of the progress, where it's like they haven't realized now that this is something that, for the effect they're trying to create, it would be good to do. And being self-taught, there is no teacher to tell us. We have to find out for ourselves where we need to improve what we're doing. Every day try to draw a little picture of an old photo for 15 minutes with pen and pencil without detailing. Yeah. Look, there's so much to be said, I think, for doing less drawing more frequently. And I think one of the problems is that when I come to do a drawing and I've got this, I want to do an artwork. And I think, I've mentioned this more and more of late, but I think it's more and more an important thing. When we learn to play the piano, we're not expecting to do performance concerts on Saturday. And yet I can start to draw and I can be really learning to draw. But for some reason, I put this pressure, this expectation on myself that if I'm any good, then I'm going to have an artwork at the end. And when my thinking is that I'm producing an artwork, and what often happens is an artwork in my head is something that that has no mistakes, then I suddenly start to focus on not making mistakes instead of creating the artwork. Hello, Saman. It's very hard with names, but welcome. My 5-minute tour. Wonderful. I'm so glad. Look, I've had quite a bit of feedback with comments that these 5-minute drawing exercises have been really helpful for people. So if you haven't tried them, look at some of my most recent videos and just give it a go. You haven't even got to lose time finding the references. You can, they're posted on the community page. Yeah, and so when I've got a largish scene to draw, I could spend like 3 hours producing a bad drawing. And by bad drawing, I simply mean one that really doesn't capture what I'm trying to, because it's gone beyond my ability, my experience and learning level to capture it well. But if I do a 5-minute drawing or a 10-minute or a 15-minute drawing, and it's not a great drawing, it still gives me all the information I need to discover to learn how I can improve. And it only took me 15 minutes to learn how I could improve, instead of taking me 3 hours to learn how I could improve. Can you see the advantage in doing these small, fast ones? And by fast, though, I don't mean rushed. I really don't mean rush. But to do it as fast as you can and still have control and an accuracy that you're able to bring consistently to it. But I think the problem is that we have this feeling of, I need to produce an artwork. The idea is that by the end of my drawing session, I'll have something I can put in a frame, or I can show people proudly, or I can take a photo of and post on social media. And none of that thinking is helpful in learning to draw. If you are learning French, you wouldn't have your first French lesson and then expect to walk onto the streets of Paris and have a conversation with anyone. And yet somehow we think with drawing that if we're going to be any good, we'll somehow be magically good straight from the start. And because we can start this by ourselves, without a teacher, without a course, without a class without anyone around us as well, it can make it very difficult for us to navigate the learning process well or at all. Um, um, and as I said, if we make the same mistakes over and over again, we end up losing the ability to see that it's not accurate, that this is actually wrong, because we get so used to seeing it. We think, oh, well, this pattern that I draw for leaves, no, they look like leaves. And what I really mean is I'm so used to thinking that this is leaves that they really look like leaves now to me. But for someone seeing them for the first time, they might think, why have they done that? I mean, I can tell it's a tree from the shape, but that doesn't look very tree-like. I know it would be a good drawing when I get halfway and I've not considered how good the drawing is or is not. Yeah. We just stick at the process rather than trying to mark our work halfway through. But can I say, it is really important to persevere with a drawing, even if the drawing's not turning out. I think another big problem that some people have, and look, can I just ask, if we perhaps have a bit of a different audience now, if you're finding some of this helpful, can you hit the like button? That's helpful for me. If you haven't already hit it, that would be great. Because there are things we learn in the second half of the drawing that we only learn in the second half of the drawing. Where we start to pull things together, where we start to create, if you like, our final package of lines, of form, of value. And it's also where we get the most potential to mitigate, to compensate for mistakes, to hide them, quite possibly. I'm amazed how many mistakes I'm able to totally hide by the end of a drawing. I don't know, there was a drawing I did at one of the 5-minute ones where almost the first, I think it was like the 4th and 5th and 6th lines I did were all in the wrong place. I misaligned them. And my first thought was, oh, look, I'm only like 30 seconds in. I will just start again. I thought, no, I'm always telling people to push on, and I pushed on, and I reckon no one would have seen that error at the end. I could hide most of it with a window, and it just, in all the other lines that I finished up drawing around it, it just wasn't so obvious. And this is the problem. When we make a mistake, it looks, especially a mistake that we make early in a drawing, then it just kind of is so glaring. We think, oh, it's just going to be, ruin the whole drawing. Almost never. I mean, I've drawn thousands of drawings in the last few years, and there's about 3 where the mistakes were where there was a line wrong that was so fundamentally wrong. I thought, I'm just not going to be able to fix that. I've just got that perspective angle, and it's just fundamental to the overall drawing. So perspective angles are probably the one thing. If you get them badly wrong, then it's probably worth starting again, because, as I said earlier, if they're wrong, you can do all the detail very laboriously, very time-consuming, do that perfect. But if the perspective angles are wrong, it will still look wrong. But once you sort of hit the more than halfway point, then there are skills that are demanded, and therefore that you need to learn in that second half. Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. Another $5 donation. Really, really do appreciate the support. That we only learn in the second half. And I'm not just talking about mistakes, but for instance, some more ads for some people, so please let them run. But again, how do I know when I'm finished? Well, if I abandon every drawing because I get kind of disillusioned or whatever halfway through, then I don't develop the skill of knowing when to finish, of knowing how to finish, of looking at something that could be finished and running through a checklist of things before we actually put the pencil down, the pen down, the brush down, whatever. Um, adjusting values, yeah, changing some lines. Yeah, silent witness. Yeah, small drawings to get to the second half more quickly, and that's great. And then there is the satisfaction. I mean, how discouraging is it to not finish a drawing and to have? I mean, who's got a stack of half-finished drawings? It's a lot more encouraging to have a stack of finished drawings. And then you have finished drawings and you think, oh, well, maybe I'll finish this. But for most of us, I think when it's a new time to draw, we think, oh, look, I've thought of something new and a few things aren't right there, so I'd rather start again. And then I get another half-finished drawing. Yeah. So does anyone think that this is ringing a bell for them, that maybe they're attempting subjects that are just pushing their ability level too much, that they maybe need to pull back and draw things less challenging, but to draw them much better? And I think the parallel is again, when my kids were learning the piano, and the piano teachers used to arrange these concerts, and they called them concerts, but it was, of course, it was only the parents who went. And it was a competitive process. It was called an Eisteddfod. And it's I think a Welsh word for I don't know, competition. And I didn't really have any experience with music. I hadn't learnt the piano or anything. But what I soon came to learn was that the kids who won, like for each level, it was the kid who played their piece most perfectly. And someone could have played, and this happened quite often, that there'd be some children there'd be a child, say, who played let's say they were 6-year-olds. He or she played a musical piece that was designed to be played and learnt by 6-year-olds, and they would play it perfectly. And then another child who was 6 would play something that to me sounded like a university level piece, but they would make some mistakes in it. And to my surprise, I mean, I'd be really impressed with the one with all the notes, but to my surprise, the one who played the 6-year-old piece perfectly would win over the other one, because it was more important to nail the piece that you were playing. That counted more than attempting something that you couldn't yet do at a performance level. And I think that's possibly where my thinking for this comes from, that we learn more by actually doing a really good drawing of a simpler subject than doing a far more complex subject that has lots of problems with it. It's easier to stay focused. It's easier to critique. It's easier to then choose another subject that builds on what we've done than jumping from one thing to another thing. I mean, I think probably nothing's more unhelpful than to try and draw a landscape one day, try and draw running horses the next day, do a portrait of your little sister the next day, draw a streetscape another day, because every one of those subjects, quite apart from general drawing skills, those particular subjects have their own challenges. And if I only stay with them for one or two subjects, one or two drawings, then I'm never going to be in a position to really understand, let alone address and to develop skills in the sorts of particular challenges. And we have that phenomena that I talk about, where if you go shallow in lots of areas, you'll only become very good at going very shallow. But if you go deep in a particular area, if you draw portraits all the time, and you train and develop and upskill yourself so that you draw really great portraits, when you go to draw a landscape, you've got lots of drawing skills that you went deep in developing. You've got lots of ideas about translating textures into line, about making marks, about creating visual interest and drama and tension and excuse me. And you can use all of those now in your landscape as opposed to a portrait. But if you do a lot of one-off subjects badly, then you haven't learned any skills to take to another totally different subject. Oh dear, yes. Okay, there's a few people confessing there. Yeah, but that's a different issue. Jumping from one subject to another is still a different subject to, or a different problem to, drawing things that are just too difficult, regardless of the subject, which really I think is the core thing, because it doesn't let us develop our skills, because we lack the guidance. It's further ahead than I'm able to work out myself in doing the drawing. And what's my advice at that point? It's to find the help you need. And part of the reason I think we can be self-taught artists is there is lots of online help, but not all online help is as helpful as other online help, and it can take a lot of time and navigating different videos, and we can spend a lot of time watching videos and not really learn anything that's helpful for my drawing. I mean, I've never actually really been a YouTube user. I guess I've just most of my life been the wrong age group for that. But certainly when I've looked at some more just recently, a lot of them are very entertaining, which is great if I want that, but don't always actually have a huge amount of input. So it may take a bit of trial and error to find the teachers who present material that's the sort of material that you're after, that will fill in some of the gaps of things you can't work out yourself straight off. Where having someone from an outside brain can give you some guidance. Yeah. Look, Teo, if it works for you, if it really does work for you, I don't know whether you're at the start of this where I said this topic came from when I look at Instagram accounts and oh no, sorry, it's the other, drawing at different subjects. Yeah. Look, there is a point where our skill development will let us do that, but I still think that when we're at the earlier drawing stage, we will learn faster, better, by narrowing the different things we have to juggle about and think about at the same time. Thanks, Ian. A little plug there for channel Windows to Heaven Art. Yeah, that's great. Draw everything too, but mostly trees. Well, trees are great subjects to draw, paint. Just go and sit under. Where would we be without trees? And look, one good thing, if you want to work on your the skill of the creative translation of what we see to marks on the paper, then work at, find a scene where there's like 3 different trees close together overlapping, and draw them, not as an artwork, just as an exercise, and see how well you capture the different feel, the different effect, the different look of each of the 3 trees. Because um, trees are often a challenge. We do have to draw the effect. We can't possibly draw all the leaves. And yet different types of trees are very different. Sometimes the leaves point up, sometimes they hang down, sometimes they're half and half. The way the leaves attach to the twigs and the twigs to the branches, the way the canopies, the big clumps of foliage form, are all very different. Some trees are a solid mass. Some trees, like our Australian gum trees, you can see through different clumps and so forth. So they're a great subject to really push our ability to see an effect and then to translate it into marks to represent, to convey that effect, rather than actually drawing a detailed accuracy that's impossible to draw. So if I can do that well for 3 different trees side by side, so that when I look at the drawing, I can see that, wow, these are 3 different trees. Even if maybe I can't tell what tree they are, I can see that this is a separate tree to that. Then I think that's a great achievement. So that is a really good exercise to work on our ability to draw the effect of detail, drawing different trees. Mostly draw buildings, but currently trying to learn to draw people. Yeah, I mean, I really only push my drawing of people to the degree of being able to put people in my streets, because when I first began to draw streets, I had no people in them because I didn't want to draw them. But it didn't take long to realize that they didn't look like real streets when there were no people, especially because I didn't draw cars either, because I didn't like drawing cars. So sometimes we do need to just persevere a bit and become comfortable with subjects that perhaps we don't have as much interest in, but do have value for things that we do want to draw. But again, I am enjoying drawing all the things that I'm drawing now for these 5-minute drawing video exercises. I've never really bothered drawing still lifes and things, but I feel like this is where I feel like I'm experiencing the benefit of having put a lot of work and effort and skill development in drawing, say, architecture, having gone deep. And now when I have a candlestick to draw, or I have a pot plant to draw, or I have just a small tree to draw, that I can grab a lot of those skills and apply them now to anything at all. Yes, scientific illustrations of trees. Yep, depending what we're trying to draw as well. And this is where, like, the scale too, it's different. The amount of accuracy I need is different if I'm relatively close to a tree, or if it's right on the horizon line and it's sort of just a silhouette. Sometimes lines should look better different on the page than being exactly what they're. Yes, look. Can I say the artist is the artist? Thank you, Venta. If you haven't, click thumbs up. If you've come later, then please do. Yes, the artist is always the artist. And sometimes we do want to make adjustments. Now, we don't want to make adjustments accidentally without intention. But yeah, no one's going to be looking at the reference. They're going to be looking at our artwork if we show this to anyone. And they're only going to see the artwork if we let them see it as well. And so I often will move things or shift things slightly to one side, because it creates, I think, a more pleasing balance of composition, or it lets me get a better, lets me put maybe 2 values, a very light and a very dark value together, which always, I think, creates some nice visual effects. So yes, absolutely. Make adjustments. That's part of what being an artist is. And sometimes, it's making them to create, to, like, when I try and do my best to put depth back into a landscape or a street scene, that often means I take a bit of license with, I don't draw things that you can see in the reference, because that's what the camera does. It includes too much detail that, if you put in, makes it look a bit unnatural. But Um, no, Alihan, what it means is that some people have come and liked but gone to bed or gone to work or gone to a different video. Um, yeah, yeah. I don't know if I've seen Andrew Wyeth's pencil drawings. I've certainly seen his paintings. Quite beautiful works. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And we make the adjustments that we feel improves what we're looking at to draw for our drawing. I mean, why wouldn't we? That's the advantage that we have as artists. And sometimes there's a big garbage bin in the front, or there's a truck, and if it's possible to take the truck out and to if we can be confident what's behind it, then that's a good thing to do as well. But I just thought of a point then. Sometimes I think, and then I get distracted by what's happening on the chat. Yeah. I'd be interested to hear if anyone can put into sort of one sentence, one point, what's the thing you think about either your attitude or your process of drawing that's enabled your skill development to continue, so that you keep improving if you're self-taught. So if you're like doing a fine arts course at uni or at college or something, then I'm not talking to you, because you do have a teacher and a curriculum. But if you're kind of trying to navigate this yourself, you have to find your own resources. You have to do your own artworks. You have to mark them yourself. You have to decide what you'll do next yourself. What do you think's been the thing about how you've been working that's helped you to continue to improve? As long as you think you have continued to improve, of course. I'd be interested to hear that teachers do nothing in fine arts. So I'm sure that's not true. Finishing drawings, yep. Take more time in between each little mark. Think, okay, yep. Oh, I just remembered the point I was going to make, that I was critiquing a drawing for a student last week, and the thing that came, one of the comments that came up was, I mean, there were lots of good things about the drawings, but there were lots of little hatching lines that just had been done with clearly less thought and care with some of the other ones. And it was like this person had thought that these bits weren't as important, and they so detracted from different aspects of the objects and scenes that they were trying to create. And I had to make the point, every line counts. Every line counts. If you want to draw things in a certain style that requires a lot of lines or hatching, then don't do it if you don't have the time and the concentration commitment to do it well. If we want to draw things with detail and we actually want to put the detail in, then we have to have the commitment to put that detail in, or to draw something else. And I do see that quite a bit too. I think, well, why did they draw this if they didn't want to kind of like, if a little bit of the detail's drawn well, and then clearly they kind of lost interest. You never saw a person who's not a good thing. I think artwork. Yeah, thanks, Dan. Yeah, look, I think, whenever we're drawing from a photo, one of the first things we have to do is to say, what am I losing in the photo? Put the three-dimensionality and the depth back in what we're seeing. I have a couple of videos where I do that, like how to look at your reference photo, practice and focus on the end goal, the next step, understanding the three-dimension form is most vital. Yep, absolutely. Yep. Okay, Aristotle. Yeah, that's great. being inspired and not specialize in, and of course practice, but I'm a landscape architect. So yep. Yeah. It's interesting that a lot of um, the daughter of friends of ours in Australia became an architect, and I don't know recently. I don't know if this reflects generally overseas, but she was telling me that that for the last number of decades, that all the computer assisted drawing had become so normal, become so sort of standard, that a lot of architects had really never had to develop the skill of drawing by hand, doing those. When I think back to when I was at school, architects did everything by hand. And so learning to draw, understanding all that perspective was really important for architects. And then it became unnecessary in certainly some places and some courses. And it sounds like Australia was one of them. And now there's this going back to architects wanting to learn the skills of hand drawing as a way of distinguishing what they can do from perhaps other architects, and to be able to bring something different to the client. Getting into one aspect of one artist and studying them helped me a lot. Yep. I think it's particularly when I see an artist who has a similar subject to what I'm drawing, and I really love how they do it. How do they do it? Now, I'm not a fan of copying line by line other people's drawings, but there is absolutely no problem with working out their technique and then finding a similar subject and seeking to draw it in their style, even with their drawing there. But to have a different but similar subject, I think, is a helpful way to use their style. But if I just draw their lines line by line, then I'm just learning to copy. I'm not learning the creative process. But if I look at their technique, and then I look at a similar drawing, and then I try and draw that in that technique, I'm still forcing my brain to apply this technique to this reference. I'm still forcing a creative process that becomes part of a learning experience for me. Gosh, these I've never had. I'm losing track of some of these. Fine art, about graphic design. Understanding the mechanics of things, the construction, the forces that push things up and down. Yeah, I hadn't ever thought of it that way. Helps me to keep a mindset that nothing that is worth doing is achieved overnight. Yep. Nothing that is worth doing does happen overnight. Read your comment detail. I did a sketch of a huge, so many windows. Yes, with architecture where there's lots of repeated details, there's no reason why I have to draw that. If I don't want to do the details, it's just not a good subject for me. I need to find a subject that I can enjoy drawing. Some things I enjoy looking at, but I don't want to draw, and that's fine. That's fine as well. Heightened level of discipline delivering the sort of. Yep, bodled up. Just saying that, yes, when you have to do it all yourself, there is a certain amount of discipline. And I think, and it sounds like you have done this, need to put some effort into organizing the process. It's not just putting effort into actually drawing, but it's putting effort into choosing good material, finding helpful subjects that are at a good level for you to be able to do well, and then to peg things in a progression. I mean, I mentioned earlier how, when I first began to draw buildings in Paris, I looked at the Musée du Louvre and thought, I'd love to draw that, but I'll never be able to draw that. Well, eventually I did, but it certainly wasn't for quite a while. And I learned my drawing skills with some easier things. It's like playing covers before you work out your own. Yeah, I don't really know music enough. I don't play music myself, but I mean that does sound like that could be right. Um, um, yep. Uh, Sorry, I don't know. I don't know Portuguese. I think that's Portuguese. If someone who knows Portuguese can tell me what Camboya has written there. Um, School might make you draw way more than you thought you could. Yes, yeah, and particularly with a teacher, um, that can be um, that is helpful. I may need to get a moderator. Is that someone who can manage the the chat for me while I'm talking? Um, the how did you do it is the core of reasoning behind it. If there are choices made, then there is the execution. Many it's hard to make choices, so the reflection. Yep. And look, the how the technique created the effect. I mean, it's at the core. This is all at the core of the creative process. Like drawing is a creative thing. There are no rules. There are no rules at all, in a sense. As the artist, I get to choose everything about how I represent a scene, um, and this is why I think I think copying the drawings of other artists is so unhelpful because it only gives us practice in copying, and it doesn't develop the creative thinking, which is at the very start, even before. I mean, I have to observe first, I think. I mean, or if I'm drawing from imagination, I have to imagine first. But then there's the creative thinking. It's how do I translate what I'm seeing using my pen or my pencil or my paintbrush or my iPad, whatever materials I've got. How do I transfer them into onto my paper, onto my whatever? How do I navigate that? How do I draw a million leaves using a pen and I've got 10 minutes? This is what pulls at my creativity, and it's good to see how perhaps other people have been able to manage that. But I still have to make choices about how I do it. Um, there's other things Sarah said. There's a lot about YouTube that I really don't know. I really am a novice at it. Do you know what? I gotta say, I was thinking this during the week. There's only one thing really that I've gone to YouTube in my life to do, and that's how to tie a Windsor knot. So, like every time I'm at the stage of life where I wear a tie when I go to a wedding or a funeral, and unfortunately, there's probably more funerals now than weddings. But I think, oh, how do you tie a Windsor? I've always just done those schoolboy ties. And at some point, I thought I was grown up enough. I should do a proper tie. And so I've got this one or two videos that I would Google and find, and I'd stand there trying to do it, and probably one time out of two it would work, but it would be the wrong length, and I've given up and gone back to the schoolboy ties, the half knots, but half Windsor knots. But I'm afraid how to tie a Windsor knot really has been my YouTube experience. So it's just been an amazing world and amazing experience, and it has been fun. My silver play button is on the way for 100K subscribers, so that's pretty exciting. So thanks especially for all the people who found me early and have hung around. Yeah, I still can't believe it. My kids' friends and my kids are very impressed that I'm getting a silver play button. So that's I'm smiling. I'm still pretty chuffed about that. However, back to thanks. I'm glad to hear that my pointers have been helpful. Drawing the same thing too much. Yep. And look, one of the downsides of a class is that the teacher has to kind of pitch at a certain level, which may be holding you back. It may not be, or they just may not be a good teacher, because let's face it, not every teacher is a good teacher. So there are some good things about being self-taught. We really can push ourselves at the appropriate pace, as long as we understand something of the learning process. Um, it's physically made, makes it easier to draw it. Yep. I mean, I don't do figures a great deal, but one someone else giving a drawing lesson to who does do figures, I was sort of saying I feel like it's important to it's almost like you need to draw a naked figure and then put the clothes on top to get a really good sense of how the clothing can um, um, sit and pull and kind of the effects. Um, yep. I think it's certainly helpful to study how other artists get the effects they want, because that then becomes information I can throw into my head and mix with all that I have going on in there, and also particularly with what I have in here that I'm thinking I'd like to put on the paper. So when is copying good? I think generally for self-taught artists, copying is never particularly helpful. I think ironically, if we get to a fairly high level of our own skill development, I think we're actually in a better place then to use the sort of skills that we might learn by copying another artist, because we've already developed our creative thinking. And so we're at that point, we're kind of like doing an intensive of another technique, of another option that we can presumably at some point incorporate into what we already have. The problem with copying the work of other artists, hate, kill, destroy, 87, and don't hate me for saying this, please. The problem with copying the work of other artists too soon is that it's just a lot easier than drawing my own drawing. And so because I don't have to do any of the creative thinking, the original artist has already done that. So I can get a better result way more easily, way more quickly. But then when I go to do my own original drawing, I haven't learned any skills from copying this artist's drawing that will even help me start. I just very few basic ones. I mean, experience drawing a line or something, but I need to learn translation skills. I need to learn how to draw the effect of things. And I can certainly be inspired by someone who's already done a good job at that, and that's a great thing to do. See ya, Alahan. Happy birthday. That's certainly a good thing to do, but got distracted saying happy birthday. Yeah, but basically we don't learn the skills to do it. I mean, I had one student say to me that that they had been copying other artists' work and they did some really nice drawings, but then when they went to do their own, I remember he said, I don't even have any idea where to start, and I feel really discouraged. And the problem is because you haven't learned where to start. You haven't learned how to do things yourself. You haven't learned to look at a scene and do that creative translation of a photo or a scene in front of me or from my imagination, use my medium and to put it on whatever I'm putting on, presumably paper or canvas. So yeah. And we just don't learn that copying, and it gives us a false sense of being better than we really are. And then we get discouraged when we can't do things ourselves or they don't look as good. We give maybe other people a false sense of how good we are if we show them drawings that we've copied. So all of that. Thanks, Araset. That's very kind. First drawing teach. Oh gosh, there's a whole lot of, oh dear, A lot of comments here. First drawing teacher must draw only a candle for most of the semester. Oh, I think I would have found that a bit tedious. I don't know, maybe it was the candle lit each week, so it burnt down a bit differently. I mean, it might have been, sounds a bit boring to me. I started wanting to do cartoons. Look, I when I was a kid, I used to draw Scrooge McDuck and Donald Duck and Huey, Dewey, and Louie. I drew a lot of them. I think the thought of Scrooge McDuck's money was made him a very attractive person to me. Ended up teaching myself and stepping back into fundamental shapes and perspective. Yeah, I mean, with cartoons, drawing cartoons as a kid probably isn't really a very helpful thing to do, because it does get us very focused on line and outline, because that's what we look at and that's what we copy to get the faces. But the interesting thing, if you look at actually the Disney animation processes, they actually used, for all those early movies at least, the Snow White type ones, they actually used real life figures who would actually, they filmed them dancing and moving in whatever way the cartoon character was going to, and then the animators actually animated over the top of that. They use that as as sort of a template to capture. So in fact, the animators, the original Disney animators, were animating from a three-dimensional form and movement, even though it might have ended up looking in lots of ways fairly two-dimensional. Yes, I will. Draw the interior of a daily house. Okay, yeah. I must admit, I haven't done many interior house drawings myself. Not every teacher is a great teacher, unfortunately. We all grow at different paces. Yeah, thanks about that. Yeah, and we only have to think back to high school to know that some teachers were great people and we loved their classes. They were fun, but they were lousy teachers. Some teachers were pretty tedious people and were pretty boring, but we actually learned and did well and got good marks from their classes. So, you know, in the end, we pick and choose what works best for us. But it's good to be conscious and to pick and choose, and not just sort of think that everyone's going to be the same. Look, solar break, I think it's helpful to a point. It's helpful to get a sense of how other people are doing it, and particularly if you see their reference. But you see, when you look at an artwork that someone else has done, you don't normally see the reference that they've used, so you can't see where that came from, what reality that work of theirs was a creative representation of. So I think that's a limiting factor. I mean, I've been surprised to discover that a lot of art videos, when the artist does a demo, you don't actually see what they're drawing from. I can't conceive why you wouldn't show what your reference is, because that's a huge amount, in my thinking, of the teaching process. It's when I look at this and I translate in my mind how I'm going to put it onto paper, it looks like this. And I don't know why, because just drawing something out of seemingly thin air is so limited in terms of the process of thinking and observing and drawing. Like, I just don't get that. Same problem with tracing. Yep. And can I say, with tracing, perhaps when you do a pencil underdrawing, be very careful how you do that, because a really unhelpful way to do it is I put my effort into the pencil underdrawing and then I draw a line over it. And I've stopped looking at my reference. And now I'm in effect just tracing with ink over the pencil. That's a great way to get a really dead, dull, lifeless line, and to in effect degrade our drawing in the final step. If you and I did draw with the pencil under drawing for all my Instagram drawings, all those big 4x4 grid architectural drawings that I did for Instagram. I had a pencil under drawing for all of those. So I had to use that then with my pen. But the way I did it was I would still look at my reference as if I had no pencil there, and I would be observing my reference and drawing as if I were drawing freehand, but letting my pencil under drawing be a guide, be an advantage. I often found that I could do a more precise line with my pen because I could see that my pencil line wasn't quite right, and I could make that greater accuracy now with my pen. So so that in a sense it was almost like I was drawing without it. I feel like I developed a way of doing it to get the best of both worlds of the pencil under drawing, but still keeping a sense of life and vitality in my line work and in the other marks I made, which is so important. Yeah. If you still like an artist when you copy, think about how it's drawn and why yeah, look, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I probably my stand, for want of a better word, on copying is probably one of the things that, if anything I say is controversial, it's probably that. But I'm really convinced that that unfortunately it's a very unhelpful pattern for my hobby practice for most people to get into. As I said, once we've developed to a relatively high skill level, then I think we can learn things by trying to do and I would say more so in painting actually than in drawing, but by trying to do an exact copy. And of course, this was something. This was a way that that traditionally artists learned. They would go to museums hundreds of years ago, and they would copy sitting. In fact, when I was in Europe a few years ago, every time you go to the Louvre or the Kunsthistorisches or something, you would see people with easels set up painting. But they're clearly not beginners when you look at their work. And so I think to get the advantage of that and not to get the unhelpful impact of that, you do need to be fairly advanced, which is a bit counterintuitive. You'd kind of think, oh, well, you know, when you're good, you don't need to do that. No, I think you are in a position to benefit from that when you are somewhat advanced in the skills that you've already developed. False sense of improvement. Yeah. Yep. They're going back. Hate, Kill, Destroy 87. Or I say that going back and re-examining the process of learning how to read or how to draw might be helpful to unlock our potential. Yes, if you feel like you've kind of not been on a great track, like if you feel that maybe you kind of went in too many directions all at once, or maybe need to pull back a bit and just really work at kind of focusing on improving in a few areas and just nailing a few things better, then it may be a helpful thing to do. Very insidious trap working with digital references for paper drawings. The sense of observation measuring is biased and spoon-fed in a way. Okay, now I've never used a digital reference for paper, but is it any different from using a photo reference, which is basically a print off of a digital reference, isn't it? It's certainly easier using a photo reference than drawing in life, because in life we're looking at a three-dimensional thing and we have to make it 2 dimensions, as well as do the translation from reality into marks with whatever we're making marks with. when I have a photo, the camera has already taken 3 dimensions and made it 2 dimensions on the paper. And so I don't have to do that. I don't have to do that translation of 3D into 2D. And so that's why it does feel easier to draw in some ways from a photo. But equally, a photo brings limitations, such as the fact that it takes away the 3 dimensions, and it brings detail too close, and therefore it reduces the effective distance. And so it creates challenges, or if you like, opportunities for us to improve, if you like, on the photo. And in doing that, in seeking to improve on our photo, it's a good way of reminding ourselves that I'm actually creating something rather than copying something. Used to copy foot rot flats. Oh yes, we had a few of those kicking around the house, Ian. Thanks, Celebrate, showing the reference. Yeah. I mean, is it true? Are there lots of drawing videos that don't show the reference? But I feel like of the few drawing videos I have watched, that in most of the ones I saw, there wasn't a reference. I have no idea whether the artist was drawing it from their imagination or whether they were copying something. And I would have thought that would have made a difference to the process, and therefore what you'd be saying and what you'd be teaching. Became quite good at using photos on my screen because the measuring is accurate, but struggle a lot with real life models. Yep. Okay. Yeah. Hey there, Khan. Yep. Welcome. Although, gosh, it's an hour 46. I'm just laughing because I said to my wife that I wouldn't go past an hour and a half tonight. It's almost 20 past 7 here in Australia, so I better start to wrap this up and get ready for Monday morning. Any last comments anybody wants to make about any of this, about particularly about what you think has perhaps put a break on your improvement, if you feel that you've maybe hit a certain level or a plateau in your drawing development and haven't been able to continue. And hey, look, hi, welcome, but we're just sort of wrapping up. But it has been great to visit this. Can I say that I do? Was there a piece of art advice that took you from being into art into really taking a step forward as an artist? Keep drawing. Yep. Thanks, Araset. Having a sketchbook I don't show any. Hey, yeah, that's great. All of these streams are available. No, 10:17. I said me too, not 20 past 7. Yeah, that's great. So, look, I am planning to. My aim is to do this every Sunday night at 8:30. So, yeah, we are wrapping up. But Ian, I'm just saying, 8:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. So whatever that works for your time zone, that's I don't quite know how to kind of give warning and organize things, but if you're kind of around at an hour and 3/4 earlier than this time, on whatever day it is, wherever you are at the moment, then you should be able to catch the start of these if you're wanting to. I'm just trying to think, was there a piece of art advice that took me from being into art into really taking a step forward as an artist? Look, I think I probably probably happened more when I was painting, because I did paint for 10 years before I drew. But um, like, the thing I actually think I benefited from most was the encouragement I got um, from social media. I mean, that sounds really weird to say, because it's not as if my family aren't encouraging. But when I began to post my drawings on Instagram, I never thought, I never dreamt that people would be so kind and enthusiastic in what they said. And it I mean, I didn't do any art till I was 50. And um, and there were reasons why I didn't. There are reasons for most people when we have art within us, but we don't do it for decades. And yeah, yeah, I think that's what really encouraged me to want to keep developing something, that there were people who were really positive about it, really saw value in it. And it was great that I had the opportunity in, I was working full-time painting at that stage. I'd reached the stage in life where I had some options in terms of family commitments and all of those very practical things, which we have to consider. So, look, look, I think we'll end there on that little personal reflection. And thanks everyone for joining. And if you haven't given me a thumbs up and you're one of the last 27 people still left and you found some benefit in this, then please give a thumbs up. If you want to catch any of the other ones that you might have missed, I obviously have a playlist. I have a live video playlist. Otherwise, I'll get a good night's sleep and then maybe do 2 more 5-minute drawings in the morning and see what else the day brings. Anyway, make sure you keep drawing, and whenever you draw, have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.